What episode is it?
88.
88? Awesome. Hello and welcome to episode 88 of Retropower Uncut. I've donned the burgundy shorts again, and this time I've gone for the matching socks also. You'll be pleased to see. I'm going to start with the Mustang. So Adam's been beavering away on this, just steadily chipping away at the assembly work. So from the top down, I think he's been doing the visor and interior mirror fitment. It's quite a cool setup on this. There's like a chrome bar that the mirrors pivot, the visors pivot on, that goes through a little holder on the mirror. It looks really smart from inside. And then the Aircon installation, which I think he was just about starting last week. So he's done the mounts for the Vintage Air under dash aircon unit, and we've been working on the plumbing. So we've got bulkhead fittings going through the bulkhead, obviously, and then he's been making up the hoses on the inside, and then the hoses that go from the bulkhead around to the compressor. And then the other hose goes all the way down to the dryer, and then the dryer in turn connects to the condenser on the front there. The only one thing we've got to do is the dryer that came with the kit has got, unusually, has got like an AN fitting on the outlet from it, rather than the normal aircon type fitting. So we're just going to machine up an adapter, which conveniently will space that over exactly right, so we can get the 90 degrees straight through the front panel and through the hole in the front panel. But that's all looking good in terms of the aircon. It's just buttoning up the rear interior trim panels. The dash, there's been quite a lot of bits and bobs on the dash. The headlight switches and bezels, or headlight and wiper switch and bezels, really cool little chrome things are now fitted. The stereo's in, which is kind of a modern functionality but vintage looking stereo, which has got matching knobs that match the original headlight and wiper switch. The wiper mechanism has been completely buttoned up and tested now. We actually upgraded that. We did some changes to put a Mondeo wiper motor in there, so it's got a more modern wiper motor on the original mechanism. What else is up behind there? All the heater cables that go to the slidey heater controls on the middle are done. So the dash is actually really taking shape. Looking good. So it looks like he's wrestling the rear window mechs, but the window mechanisms are all pretty much done. So I think we are going to be on to glazing pretty soon, glazing squad. So yeah, good progress on that. Utah, that came back from detailing, detailed by Dale. So he's done full machine polish, ceramic coating throughout. He's ceramic coated the wheels as well. I think he ceramic coated the chrome, and just gave the inside a bit of a spruce up. And then I'm now in the thick of some remaining jobs on it. And you might ask, well, why on earth have we detailed it not as the last thing? But it does get very fraught in the latter stages of the project, because the owner invariably wants the car back really desperately. And then anybody who's decent, any subcontractor who's decent, such as Dale, tends to have a bit of a waiting list. So it's this juggling act of trying to decide when to book it in for that, so there's not a delay. But then running the risk of then finding that you haven't finished everything. So as it is, we were most of the way through, but I've got a few jobs remaining on it. So it's been for detailing. All the machine polish and ceramic coating will still be in effect. We'll just give it a final quick clean session ourselves here for the final handover. But yeah, that would give me another opportunity to drive it as well, which all went well. I really enjoyed the drive to his and back. The things I'm on with on that, well, the most swear-worthy one is actually sitting right next to me here, which has been on the cards for a while. I've known about it for a while. I've just been putting it off to make sure we knew that anything else behind the dash wasn't going to need any work, because I only really wanted to take the dash apart on the car once. But a while ago, when I was trying to fit the thermostat capillary that goes into the top of this aircon heater unit, I managed to burst the core of the evaporator, the aircon evaporator, which was somewhat frustrating at the time. So I've known for a while I'm going to have to change this. I was just waiting until right at the end, in case there was any other reason anything behind the dash needed to come apart. So yeah, it's one of those. I'm sure everybody will be also too familiar with the feeling of people who have built cars where you're pretty much there and then find you've got to take 10 steps back again to finish it. But yeah, yesterday I bit the bullet, took all of the necessary bits of the dash apart, got the old heater aircon unit out. Then today, at the latter part of yesterday and today, I've been noticing how many changes we made to the original. And so we've actually modified them to intake from the opposite side. So we cut this side of the blower unit out, modify the fan so it can intake through the opposite side, blank off this side so the air intake's here, not there, because we're intaking from a sealed intake which actually goes to the grills on the front of the car rather than just recirculating from inside the car. This pipe was also modified shorter, and we soldered a little olive onto it to recreate the bead, because we can't really bead it in situ with the pipe on there. So yeah, I've just been going through basically bringing this back to the modified state that the original was in, and then this afternoon I'm going to get that back in the car. The other thing, two things I've been working on actually, with suspension. We redesigned the mounts for the rear dampers because we were a little bit short on travel. I don't know if anybody noticed, but any shots of it leaving here for a drive, it was looking quite high at the back, and that's because we jacked up the rear suspension to get a decent amount of travel there for me to be able to take it out. But actually we were a little bit short on travel at the back, so we redesigned the suspension coilover mounts on the back so the coilover eyes sit a little closer to the shell and the axle to give us more travel. But that's all looking good. I've also swapped to some softer springs on the back. And the other thing was the anti-roll bar. Now, when we were at the metalwork stage, we put provision in the shell for a front anti-roll bar, but we never fitted it because we weren't sure whether it was going to be necessary or not. But having driven the car, it does have a fair bit of body roll. So we're doing like I'd call it a NASCAR style anti-roll bar, but it's basically just a straight tube with splined ends, and then you have these sort of blades that go onto the splines, and then a drop link which will actually pick up on the original Mark II Jag anti-roll bar mount point on the wishbones. So I've mocked all that up, that's looking good. Just need to take some bits apart on that and get them painted. That'll be ready to go on. So I'm hoping with this aircon heater hopefully going back together nicely today, and those bits being painted tomorrow, should be on for final test drive and just ironing out any remaining niggles early part of next week. And I think we're a pretty good chance we'll be handing that over next week. So fingers crossed, watch this space on that one. If I smooch around here, if that's a word, well, it is a word, but it doesn't mean walking. The Morris is on the ramp here. Guys are just on with the Aircon compressor installation. So Adam designed a mount which has been machined by Andy at Concept 303 for the Aircon compressor. We've used just a generic sanding compressor which has got the sort of traditional style threaded fittings on it, and it's nice and compact. That sits in there really nicely, and then they've just been sorting out the belt run for that. That's all looking nice and neat, and I think John's about to, or in fact this is what they're doing now, is putting the front anti-roll bar on that. In other news on this, George has been carrying on with his work on the doors. I think last week we showed that we were doing some minor tweaks to the alignment of the door window runners to make sure that the single piece glass was definitely going to roll up and down nicely without snagging, because it's very easy to get lulled into a false sense of security using wood or plastic dummies, because they can twist a bit whereas the actual glass won't. So the offside door needed a bit of a revision to get the runners exactly at the same angle. The near side's fine. So we're looking pretty good on that. And then that was leading up to the fact we also wanted to finalise the little corner pieces that hold the mirrors. They're going to be machined from aluminium. They're just 3D printed prototypes in there now. So we wanted to make sure that they were holding the frame at the right angle where they bolt up to the frame, and then B, we wanted to get a seat in so we could sit in the seat and check that the angle that the mirrors mount at gave you a sensible range of movement, and it was well worth doing, because actually the initial angle meant that the mirrors needed to be almost all the way to one side of their adjustment to get a decent view. So we've tweaked the angle of those and reprinted some prototypes, which I think are the ones on there now, so that with somebody, well, my height, I'm roughly the same height as the customer, with the mirrors are pretty much in the middle of their adjustment to get a good field of view. So they're looking good. We should be able to send those files off for machining. And now we've done the tweaks on the frames and done the final templates for the glass, we can get the door glass cut. So that's all coming together. And then I think with the aircon compressor on now, John can start working on the aircon plumbing. That'll be his next port of call. And the diff as well. Jim was building the diff last week, which is now done and ready to fit into the casing. So at some point when it's convenient, we'll drop the diff casing back out of this, assemble a diff and get the whole thing in for the final time. And then Land Cruiser, you can actually see behind me, Jim's just fitting the front axle up to the chassis. So last time, I'll just move over here, last time he was just doing the axle build themselves. which went pretty well. I think we were talking about the fact we were just setting up the diffs, and one of them needed a bit of work on the pinion shimming to get that pinion bearing preload right. But that was the only particular complication. The rest of the actual build's gone really well. Adam's been working on the Aircon compressor, which is just over to my left on the bench. He's literally just been doing the rebuild of that compressor because we're using all of the original Toyota ancillary parts. So the compressor's been stripped down and he got a rebuild kit for that, so it's just putting that back together. The starter motor and alternator also we rebuilt, so they went to our rotating electrics place, who I now think Cox Auto Electrical in Atherstone. So they do the electrical part of the rebuild, but in the interim, as with a lot of the things like the transmissions, etc., we take back the casing and the fasteners, plate them, bead blast them, do the surface finishing stuff, then give it back so they can do the final build. So they're back here, and as is the engine block and heads, which took a little longer than we thought they might to do the skimming and honing work on those, but they're back now. So we've basically got everything we need to do the engine build. And then also on the Land Cruiser, the transfer case. I think we talked previously about the fact the auto box is away being rebuilt. Now the transfer box is a separate entity that bolts to the back of the main transmission, and actually the two transmission places we normally use shied away from it and said they didn't want to do it. So Nat has been on the strip down of the transfer case, which actually went all right. There was a couple of little awkward areas. There's a case, like a cap over the top of the oil pump. It's actually got a gear type oil pump that does a pumped feed of oil to the bearings in the box. And the cap over that, one of the, they were like star drive bolts that holds it in, one of those rounded off, so we had to drill that out, but thankfully the drill out went smoothly on that. And then there's a plate that goes over one of the output shafts. It has like a plate that retains it, and it's actually quite interesting because behind it it's got like ring type seals, almost like piston ring seals on the shaft, and then there's an oil feed from the oil pump, which I just mentioned, to between those two rings and to a drilling that then feeds the oil down to the roller bearings on there. And then the whole assembly is retained by this back plate on the inside, which is kind of sealed to keep the oil from the oil feed in. And the workshop manual simply says remove the 3 bolts and withdraw the plate. Which is not a ridiculously tight fit, but because there's only 3 positions you can pull it on and not much clearance behind to get in with any kind of normal puller, you kind of find that it starts to go skew whiff and then locks up, so you have to just tap away on each hole just fractionally to sort of walk its way out. And that came out, but yeah, other than that, it's all looking good. A couple of the bearings, interestingly, did look like they needed replacing. So with transmissions, you often have this thing in your mind of, is anything actually going to be worn out and worth replacing, and is it worth doing all this work? And there were a couple of bearings that needed doing, so that's good. And then the casing's been blasted, all the steel bolts and nuts, etc., all been bagged up, ready to go for plating. So that's in progress now as well. So hopefully the transmission should be done in the next few weeks. That transfer case we should be able to rebuild in the next few weeks along with the engine. And hopefully everything will come together nicely and coincide with the chassis being completed up to a rolling state. And one of the things that's allowing that is the rebuild and fitment of the leaf springs. And I will hand over to Nat to explain how they did that process. So here's Nat.
Well, thank you, Cal, for the handover there, and we are going to pick straight up with another little bit of Land Cruiser. We are by the fly press in the fabrication shop. I'm going to put my coffee down so I can point at things better. I don't know whether Cal will have already just shown them next door, but we needed to rebuild the leaf springs for the Land Cruiser. Now, there was a decision to make. We can buy new ones from the aftermarket, but they're suspiciously cheap, and I'm a bit wary about things that are suspiciously cheap because they're usually not very good. So we elected, since the truck was sitting at the correct height anyway, and the springs didn't appear to have sagged or come to any harm, and the corrosion on them was pretty minimal, we elected to reuse them but rebuild them. So James has stripped them apart, cut the old clamps off, taken the rivets out, stripped them all down, then they've been blasted and Xylan coated, which is a PTFE based coating, which actually does a couple of things. A, it's very good anti-corrosion, but B, it's also quite slippery. So ideal for coating leaves of leaf springs in. So we've done that, and it's a very durable coating, which then lends itself to the next follow-on process. Obviously, once we've done that coating, we've got to reassemble the springs. So James and I came up with a bit of a plan for how to make the clamps, what material to make the clamps out of, etc., etc. So we've got some, James got some 20mm by 5mm 304 stainless flat bar, hot rolled bar, and then we've got some hot rivets. I've forgotten the name of the company now. Jamie will put a little bit of script in to thank the name of the company, because I've forgotten them, but there's a fairly local company up in Ashby de la Zouch. Surprisingly hard to buy hot rivets or solid steel rivets to all the relevant British standards for the various sizes. They're surprisingly difficult to get hold of. However, there's a fairly local company not too far up the road that actually manufactures them and stock holds a huge number in a huge range of sizes. And had the exact ones which we needed, which were 8mm, 90-degree shallow countersunk head, 16mm length hot rivets, which we've got. And then, with a bit of head scratching, James made a bit of a tool to go in the fly press, where we've welded on some chunky 30mm tool steel blocks, and then we've got a nice little dimple, which is a bit mauled now, but he used a ball nose cutter to put a bit of a dimple in the middle of the plate so that would shape the rivet heads. And basically that acts as the rivet set, and then we worked out a way of closing the stainless steel clamps around the springs in the fly press in a couple of operations without having to spend a fortune on making a tool for the job. We've done it relatively simply. So he's cut all the sections of stainless steel to length, drilled them, marked them all out, drilled them, made the tool, got the springs assembled with the rivets between the correct leaves, and then between us we've then shaped all those, heated the rivets, then put them in the tool, bent the clamps round, and then closed them over with a hammer. We've used another lump of nice, decent quality steel so that it doesn't bell the ends, and bent the ends of the flat bar over, and then closed them over in the fly press. And it's all worked out really well. They look pretty much OEM, only they're stainless steel clamps, so they shouldn't rot. And the Xylan coatings come out almost completely without damage. So we're really, really quite pleased with the result, actually. It's worked out. It's one of those rare occasions where something that you kind of work through a process on has actually come out better than planned rather than slightly worse than planned. So yeah, we're really, really happy with that. And the old fly press got a bit of a workout on the job, so it was quite nice to do all that. So yeah, that job worked really well. Leaning to the other side, we've got the Mark 1 Escort. Tom did some work earlier on at the beginning of the week on this. Last week, where we left off last week was getting the roof fit up pretty much there. It wasn't perfect. There are a few slightly iffy bits of fit in the corners, but I don't imagine much worse than a standard roof was originally. Looking at a factory Escort, the unmolested factory Escort, looks broadly similar. So Tom spent a bit of time getting the fit right on that, and at the end of last week he pretty much got that. A couple of slight tweaks on Monday morning, and he then got all that finally clamped and prepped with the weld-through primer on the back for sort of a final glance over, check the glass in again, check everything looked right, which it did, and he's then got that all spot welded on now. So we've just got he's left a couple of unattached sections in the back corners, because we need to do a little bit of shaping and just push the flange forward a little bit in the corners. So a little bit of work to do there. And then on the front corners, obviously we've got to do the braze fills in the corners, and then we're going to put some lead in there. And then on the back corners the same, we've got to braze and we're going to lead as well the back corners. But that's all really, really close now. That's a really pleasing stage that lot's at. And then for my part, on Monday I finished off a couple of little bits of CAD work, but we were pretty much there. Certainly by the end of the day on Monday we were at the sort of CAD work finish stage, and then this box down here is now full of all of the profile CNC plasma cut parts to build 2 rear suspension cradles. All being well, as long as I haven't made any mistakes in the CAD work, there's about 50 parts in there, ranging in thickness from 2mm up to 6mm. That's the thickest part, which is a piece that goes across, bolts to the back of the diff casing, and carries 2 bushes on these 2 points here. There are 2 threaded bosses which get attached to that, and that carries the diff and takes the torsional, the twist force in that direction. That takes the diffs all here off the front of that. That takes the torsional load as you accelerate and decelerate. The 2 bushes on there, which we use, well, the redesigned rear end that I did, I used BMW E36 rear diff wing bushes on that, and I use an E36 diff nose bush on it as well. It's a 3 bush mounting setup, so there's 2 on the back that take the torsional loading and 1 on the front that takes the forward and rearward rotational loading, torque reaction when you accelerate and decelerate that way, because obviously there's kind of a compound angle that the diff tries to rotate through under acceleration and deceleration. So that's the heaviest part, and then the thinner parts in here are down to these sort of things, these 2 mil thick little pieces which are which have got to be rolled, and there's some gusset sections just that brace up, well, they brace these parts here. These parts here are sandwiched into the tube work, carry a bush which has got to be a bush tube which has got to be machined, and those BMW bushes press into that, and these are the gussets that will gusset this into the tube work once they're rolled to take that shape, and then the shorter ones will be rolled to take that shape. They'll all be assembled. This is all 2mm thick mild steel. So the bush tubes will be welded in there, TIG welded all the way around, TIG welded all the way around. All this will be TIG welded into the tube work. There'll be 2 of those, 1 each side, which then, as I say, carry that big thing I call the bat wing, which holds the diff. So that's all the setup there. That's a sort of a pile of bits awaiting fabrication now. So the next step on that lot is the tube work. I've got to get I've drawn all the tube sections. So I've got to get the tube bender set up. We'll bolt that down to the floor in here. So because we put it away when we're done, because we don't do that much tube work. So we have to bolt. I'll just bolt the tube. We've got a couple of points in the floor where we've got raw bolts in the floor, and I'll just bolt it down so I can bend the tube sections, cut and bend all the tube sections for that, and fish mouth the ends and whatever. And then I've got to make some fixtures. We're actually waiting on a welding table. We needed another welding table in here anyway. Now we've got a few more people. We're always not fighting over, that's an exaggeration, but we're always tripping over each other for welding space. So we needed another welding table anyway, and I figured for fixturing it would be handy to have a fixture table with the type with the 16mm holes in, so that we can put location pegs in and we can fit table clamps down to them. And it would also be really handy for doing hammer form work, which we've got some of coming up as well. So Mack Industries are building us 2 metre by 1 metre 8mm thick top fixture table at the moment, so hopefully end of next week, early week after, we should be getting that fixture table, and I'm going to build the wishbone fixtures for this and the rear and the main tube fixtures on that Mack table as soon as that turns up. So I'm just getting all the bits ready so that once the table arrives, then I can do those bits on that. That's pretty much where we're at with Escort. So we're going to swing round now in the direction of Churchill. I think we're going to move on to the Churchill Jaguar next. We'll go around here. We'll have a swig of coffee and put it down there so I can point at things again over here. On this, Stu's been working away on the back end of this. He's been finishing off the work on, it started last week, I think there was a little bit of footage last week of making the chassis rails. So he's got a rough one there where he's done so I don't know if I mentioned this last week, probably not, about doing these nice radius bends. Here's a top tip. For anybody that works using box section and wanting to make nice radius bends in chassis rails. I mean, that's a very crude marking out of how to do it. You basically, if you mark out the correct cut sequence within the wall of a box section, it enables you to do a cut and bend on the piece of box, leaving the outer wall intact like that, and still have a nice radius of the same size as the width of the tube, so you end up with quite a neat arrangement without having to bend it. And the cutout is sort of like that. You basically, it's quite difficult without a bit of paper to draw on and explain it all. It's quite hard to explain how to do the marking out, but basically using the width of the tube and a set of dividers, you can actually mark it all out. And that's basically the cutout that you do, is 2 arcs from the 2 sides of your basically if you weren't doing the radius, you'd do a mitered bend with a square corner. You would that would be your cutout for your mitre, would be that V shape there. Not explaining this brilliantly, but bear with me. You would do a cutout to a V shape and it would come to a point there. So what you do is you then, from the back of those points, you then draw an arc of the width of your box section, less a tiny bit, less the wall thickness. Draw an arc each way from there, and then cut out between that arc and the wall, cut out that shape there, and then it enables you to bend that back on itself. I'm going to ruin Stu's tool here, but I'll open it back up again, and basically do that. Now this tool has been made with a kerf width in it so that you can use a plasma cutter nozzle and run that round the inside of there, which is why that's been done to that shape. But basically you can, using that shape, you can imagine without that kerf width in there, how you can turn that into a bend in a piece of box section and without having to cut the outside wall. It's just a neat way of doing it. It's fairly obvious when you think about it, but it's not something that everybody knows, so it would be worth pointing out. But that's how those bends have been done neatly in there. Obviously, Stu's then a stage further on with this one. He's just put the two tubes through there. We've got crush tubes set through the rail there to carry the mounts. I think they're E-type rubber rear subframe assembly mounts, but they're the same as the S-type ones. The XJ ones are slightly different, the later ones. Basically, the Jaguar rear subframe mounts bolt through there. He's drilled a clearance hole one side and then a bigger hole for a tube the other side, and then put two tubes through there, which he's had to mill flats onto the sides of to clear the inside of the wall of the box section. Drop those tubes through against that wall, and then they're puddle welded in from this side. They're TIG puddle welded round there and round there. They're V'd out and then puddle welded so that the tubes stay in position, and it means then the box isn't crushed when you do the mounts up. It clamps onto the box and won't crush the box section. So that one's done. The other mount will be going on a section. This will be this way up, obviously. That's the back of the car that way, the boot. That's the front, and this is that side rail. This is the one for the offside. At the front, that's coming down, slimming down to 60 by 40 because it's a 60 by 40 section that's tying into the rest of the car down here, and then there's going to be a gusset coming up at an angle there, and that gusset will have the other two mounts within it there. I don't think he's done that bit yet, but that's the template of where the mounts sit. So you can see that those two are there, and the other two sit currently in free space there, but there'll be a gusseting this section into what was the original Mark II Jaguar rear rail section, where it comes on, if those are not familiar with the Mark II Jaguar, a very large chassis rail comes back, and originally these cars were on quarter elliptic springs which were cantilevered off the back of a very large chassis rail. What we do is, and then there was a smaller rail coming up off the top of the back of that rail, coming up and over to carry the rear part of the car. On the S-type, Jaguar basically beefed all that section of rail up to carry the independent rear end and stretched it all backwards. We've done similar on this, only without stretching the back end out like the S-type did, which in my personal view looks pretty ugly. On this, we're keeping the rear end more true to the original Mark II type of design, which looks quite neat and tucked in, but still moving everything back and making the space for the IRS setup. We've got the benefit that we're not going to have to try and accommodate a full-size spare wheel like Jaguar did. We're going to use a space saver spare, which gives us a bit more boot floor space, and we're also moving the fuel tank to above the axle assembly, not in the back corner. We prefer, although the weight's slightly higher up, the weight's further forward, swings and roundabouts, but I'd rather have the weight a bit further forward, even if it's a bit higher up, rather than having it right hung out at the back. So that's what we're doing there. So that's the situation we're in with this. They're just a couple of the crush tubes Stu's machined up. These are what are dropped through in here, but with a flat milled, I'm going to sneeze. Oh dear. These are dropped through there with a flat milled off on one side, so they sit against the side of the box section in there, and then, as I say, puddle welded in. So that's where Stu's at with Churchill. Stu's actually off today. He's actually had a bit of time to do a bit of work on his own vehicle. He's trying to get a bit of work done on his Range Rover, so that's why he's not hovering around here busy away today. He's had a very rare day off to try and get a bit done on his own car, because he struggles a bit for time to get on with that. So that's where Stu is at the moment. And then we'll sort of, I'm trying to think the best place to go and stand here. We'll stand by the Jensen, maybe. Yeah, we'll sort of stand over here and I'll point. Tom is working on the Jensen. we're at the point here, we're at a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I'm going to put my cup down again over there. We're at a bit of a chicken and egg situation on the Jensen in terms of the door gaps. Obviously, we've done a load of fiberglass work at the on this panel, on what you would even call this panel. We've done a load of fiberglass work on that, and we've done a load of fiberglass work on the revised shape of the rear quarters. In between those two sits originally an aluminium door skin on a steel door frame like that. We've rebuilt the frames. We wanted to remake the door skins. The original design left a lot to be desired, and they were a bit rotten and damaged and needed stripping. You know, basically they weren't much good really, so they wanted remaking. So we are in the process of doing exactly that, and that's a very roughed out shape for the skin blank, just clamped in place, and Tom's got there, which he's put through the roller to sort of put the initial curvature on this way. He's put through the roller and he's done some very light wheeling on it, which is actually getting somewhere near. Literally, I've only just seen this. Yeah, that's actually getting somewhere near. There's a few lows and highs in it, but it's somewhere near. We found a little problem on our English wheel actually, which we didn't know, which was one of the rolls has got a slight eccentricity in it, which threw us a bit of a googly. We hadn't particularly noticed it because we don't wheel that many very long panels with a constant curvature on. And we've picked up that one of our wheels isn't very good, so I need to get that reground. But yeah, that's what Tom's working on at the moment. So I think he's blanked he's got the other side blanked out as well. So he's going to and as I say, he's done the basic curvature on that. His next operation is going to be to scribe off his offsets for the returns on the front and the rear and the base. The base will be a folded one. The base is straight, so that'll be folded, so that's fairly easy to do. But the front and back are not straight, so the returns on those, he will put the initial folds in on our Pull Max, which isn't a Pull Max, it's a Pels, Henry Pels, our nibbler. He'll tip the edges on that. We tend to find it's easier to tip the edges on that than it is on the Jenny rolls. 6 and 2 3s, they'll both do the job. We tend to go to the Pels, the nibbler. It's actually easier for one person to do the job on that. We haven't got a powered Jenny. It's another thing we keep thinking about doing, is getting a powered B-roller Jenny, whatever you like to call it. It would be handy to have, but at the same time, because we've got the Pels nibbler, we tend to just use that. So anyway, that's what that'll be done on. So he'll put the creases down the front and back, so he can start knocking those over by hand. Once you put the crease in on the nibbler, then you use a hammer and dolly to complete the turning operation on that flange. And then as you do that, obviously the shape changes because you gain material relative to the edge when it's curved. So he'll then use the shrinker to get rid of that material as he brings, say, on this front edge, as he brings the edge round, as he brings that edge round that way, that will try and straighten that panel out. So then he'll have to shrink that material down so that it brings the curvature back on the panel. So that's so he'll be doing that as he puts that shape onto the panel, and then he's got to start once the front and rear and the base are done. He'll then have the work on the top to do. Now the top's going to be quite challenging, so we're going to make. I haven't got the skin to hand to show you, but the top's got quite an awkward shape. It looks like two folds, but one of them's on a curve, and that curve then flows out into the compound curve of the top of the door. So there's no way of folding that section. You can fold the next one around from that. So we've ummed and ahed about ways of doing it. I think on the original door skins that was pressed. On these, what we're going to do is do it as a separate piece. So we're going to cut the door skin, the top off this. We'll make the top section separately, which will give us the ability to put the correct shape onto it in two operations, on the folder and then the Pull Max, to make the shape there. And I think it'll take a couple of goes to get it right, and at that point we're not scrapping a whole door skin each time we do it, we're only scrapping the little bit when we do it. But I think with a couple of goes to get that right, we'll be able to make the top section, and then we'll put a weld in, it'll be somewhere in this region, there'll be a weld the full length along there then, to join the top section with the complicated shape to the rest of it, which is a relatively simple shape. Hopefully that plan will work. It should do, I don't see any reason why it won't. So that's where we're at on Jensen, his door skin manufacture. And then, last but not least, we're over to Camaro. And I'd be exaggerating calling it a pit of despair, but not exaggerating by much. We're in panel fit misery. There's been quite a lot of 2 steps forward and 1 step back with panel fitters, just because every time we fit one part, it moves another part, and everything, I think we mentioned this before, and it seems to be a theme with, particularly with American cars of this sort of era, that everything, the tolerancing of one part to another was kind of very loose. And the problem with that is when trying to build something with accurate panel gaps, it's trying to make those clearances less loose, then limits your adjustment for things. So you kind of have to build everything up, but then maintaining the location for those panels for the next time you build it up is extremely difficult. And you really do want those locations to be maintained for when you're trying to build the car up in final paint. So there's been a lot of toing and froing and trying to work out the order for assembly of all the parts, and what shims are needed where, and what spaces are needed where, and what slots are needed where, and all the rest of it, so that the parts actually assemble with some degree of consistency, which is an ongoing battle. But I think it's a battle that now I'd have to say I think we're winning. Gary's going to tell me the other, just. I think that's probably the best summary, just. We are winning now. It's been, nobody in here has enjoyed this week. Right. We found a little error there, but nothing too major. But yeah, I think it's a battle that we are winning now. It's been challenging. I've been in here a few times. Cal's been in here a few times, and Gaz has. Fortunately, doesn't have any hair, so he's not pulled it out. Mark's has gone grey. But yeah, it's a battle we are succeeding in now. So I think Gaz was telling me earlier we're going to have to put a little bit more polyester in a few areas where we've been playing fairly relentlessly with the door to wing fit and the door to wing gap, which we were last week, so it was an ongoing theme. But we've actually gone through all the build in that area in a couple of places, and we don't, after all that work, we don't want any ripples in that area. So he's going to put some more polyester on there just to blend those areas out to make sure there's no rippling in that area. Because once you go through to the metal in selected areas, the transitions from polyester to metal tend to become obvious one way or another. Unless you're using an acrylic block with no give in it at all, pretty much whatever sanding block you use is going to cause a slight deviation where you transition from polyester to metal. And that means that although it'll seem incredibly slight and basically invisible, when you get the final clear coat on, it always highlights any of those areas, and you'll see tiny ripples where the transitions were. So he's going to add some more polyester to blend those areas in and reblock those, and then I think, notwithstanding another round or two of panels on and off and lots of problems and head scratching and moving things around in their adjustments, we'll be at the primer stage. So hopefully next week, fingers crossed, with the following wind, we should be in epoxy, I think. As long as we don't find any more little gems waiting around the corner to catch us out. But yeah, so I think that pretty much rounds up where we are this week, with very dusty people working on a very dusty Camaro. So yeah, we'll see you again in a week's time and see where we're at then.